Good morning, everyone. Only in the darkness can you see the stars. This quote from Martin Luther King Jr. really spoke to me about the time we're living in right now. As a community, we're grieving the loss of Ian, and many members of our community have asked for prayers as they grieve losses or struggle with difficult diagnoses or battle illness. We've been inspired by Fran's words of gratitude to all of us after Ian's death. How Ian had a good life and a good death. I realized through my grief how that was one powerful message of seeing the stars in the midst of darkness. Seeing the stars, how do we proceed during this time when snow comes and goes in the cold of winter, when it is so dark so much of the time? But slowly, light is returning to our mornings. People continue to die in our long-term homes while we don't move fast enough to protect our vulnerable seniors. But more people are getting vaccinated, though it's a bumpy and slow ride. An excellent article in today's Star really highlights some great movement that we could take as a society for long-term care. Trump is gone, kind of, and some semblance of sanity is returning to our large neighbor to the south. Finally, there is needed spotlight on the systemic racism toward our Black and Indigenous community members. And maybe, just maybe, we will demand at the minimum clean water for all Indigenous communities across Canada. And dare we hope for a renewed focus on the climate change emergency? I see these points of hope as stars. Today, I'll try to speak about our Isaiah reading and the Mary Oliver poem, and we'll read two other poems as part of this reflection this morning. Our reading from Isaiah calls out repeatedly, "Do you not know? Have you not heard? Lift up your eyes and look to the heavens. Who created all these? Our Creator who brings out the starry host one by one and calls forth each of them by name." Seeing the stars again. God brings princes to naught and reduces the rulers of this world to nothing. And then Isaiah brings us to the climax of this reading. God gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young women and men stumble and fall. But those who hope in God will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will walk and not be faint. How will this happen? We need the hope that our strength will be renewed and that we will soar again. We desperately need to know how and when. How do we restore or renew our strength? How do we rest in our isness, as Keith spoke of last week? As part of our renewing our strength like eagles, I believe we are called to value both our doing and our being. If we deplete ourselves, not only can we not do our good work very well, we may then also not honor the crucial importance of honoring our isness, our core being that is good and is of God. It's a kind of seesaw balance I think we seek, loving our core that can rest in silence and renewing our strength as well, so as to also soar like eagles. John O'Donohue's Blessing for One Who is Exhausted speaks to this yearning to renew our strength, and to me sounds like this endless COVID time. When the rhythm of the heart becomes hectic, time takes on the strain until it breaks. Then all the unattended stress falls in on the mind like an endless increasing weight. The light in the mind becomes dim. Things you could take in your stride before now become laborsome events of will. Weariness invades your spirit. Gravity begins falling inside you, dragging down every bone. The tide you never valued has gone out, and you are marooned on unsure ground. Something within you has closed down, and you cannot push yourself back to life. You have been forced to enter empty time. The desire that drove you has relinquished. There is nothing else to do now but rest and patiently learn to receive the self you have forsaken for the race of days. At first, your thinking will darken and sadness take over like listless weather. The flow of unwept tears will frighten you. You have traveled too fast over false ground. Now your soul has come to take you back. Take refuge in your senses. Open up to all the small miracles you rush through. Become inclined to watch the way of rain when it falls slow and free. Imitate the habit of twilight, taking time to open the well of color that fostered the brightness of day. Draw alongside the silence of stone until its calmness can claim you. Be excessively gentle with yourself. Stay clear of those vexed in spirit. Learn to linger around someone of ease who feels they have all the time in the world. Gradually, you will return to yourself, having learned a new respect for your heart and the joy that dwells far within slow time. The joy that dwells far within slow time. So, noticing the stars of hope and balancing our work for justice with times of reflection and recharging is perhaps another lesson for us to learn. As John writes, draw alongside the silence of stone until its calmness can claim you. And then there is the Mary Oliver poem, First Snow. The struggle to find meaning in the darkness, calling us back to why, how, whence such beauty, and what the meaning. The snow began here this morning and all day continued, its white rhetoric everywhere. She continues with, the silence is immense, and the heavens still hold a million candles, those stars again. And how she ends, and though the questions that have assailed us all day remain, not a single answer has been found. Walking out now into the silence and the light, under the trees and through the fields, feels like one. Breathtakingly beautiful, these images of waiting in the dark, wondering what all this grief and loss and darkness and immense need are about. But then noticing the silence, the snow, the stars, the glimmers of hope that are coming. And one way we have to really notice this beauty of creation is to ground ourselves in silence and reflection. What is that answer that Mary Oliver is revealing here? Circling back to our isness learnings of last week, I would like to think that the blanket of snow, the silence, the stars lighting the heavens, the eternity, the good that is revealed, that's all around us, waiting under the anxiety, the unknown, the questions. I have certainly found grounding and silence in nature, but sometimes the answer comes to us in other ways. When I was a young person in my 20s, I worked the overnight shift in a large men's shelter in Boston called Pine Street Inn, very much like our Seton House here in Toronto. During that time, I also lived at the Catholic Worker House, Haley House in Boston. One night, I was sitting in a chair in one of the lobbies. I think we called this one the Red Lobby, where about 100 men slept on the floor. This was the 1980s. Some on pieces of newspaper they had laid out, others with their heads on their backpacks or coats rolled up. People were snoring, some were coughing or sick, others were beginning to withdraw from substances. Probably about 100 men lying on this lobby, and I was the lone staff person sitting on the chair. Looking out over these sleeping and struggling men, I was so overcome with sadness that my heart felt like it was going to burst. Just at that moment, I looked up onto the wall of the Red Lobby where a giant poster of the Rouault painting of Jesus with his crown of thorns was hanging. One of the ceiling lights hit the poster of Jesus right where his eyes were, seemingly looking down on the men on the floor, and it made him look like he was crying. I cried with him. It was one of those moments of meaning I'll never forget, and I credit that moment for starting me on my life path. Meaning can be so entwined with hope that it becomes a shining beacon, or continuing to push this metaphor a bit, another star for us, lighting our way forward. So what are the answers that are beginning to shine forth? Again, pushing that metaphor a bit. When I worry and love and worry some more about my son Tobias, maybe the answer isn't in frantically searching for the perfect supportive housing apartment in some ideal building. Maybe it's to continue to listen closely to Tobias and my grown kids for answers and creative suggestions for what to do after I'm gone. Part of this journey for me is in loving Tobias, working hard to create options for him, but also trusting in the love in the universe and in all the good people around us. My image of Tobias lost and alone and waiting in line for a shelter bed, like so many I know, does not have to be his future when I'm gone. As scary as this is, I need to slow down and trust in the goodness of others, as well as listening to his and others' good ideas for his future health and safety. Instead of trying to fight the big Goliaths and worrying about how the voices of those living in encampments are not being heard, I need to continue finding the allies to stand with, to call out for justice and work like hell to make it happen. Maybe these are the stars that shine out in the night, stars like our own Zach and others among us, shining brightly, speaking truth to power, and caring for the houseless among us. Trying to put into practice systemic nonviolence, stand with strength and power to speak truth to those rulers who could do more, but without shock or horror when we're not listened to. Don't expect the rulers to give up their power, but maybe the rulers whose motivation is only power and the status quo will be reduced to nothing, as Isaiah prophesied, while we stand with others and link arms to build, collaborate, and seek justice. As I've pondered these questions, I'm reminded how often gratitude is the way out of despair and helps us to see the stars in the darkness. As Carolyn Myss says in Intimate Conversations with the Divine, when difficulties come, as they always do, it is the grace of gratitude that we should dwell in. Always head toward the light when you feel fear and darkness near you. My final poem is from our own precious poet, Ian Soughton, Dry Bone Valley, from his book, The Stink of Experience. It's like trying to stay upright, scorched and breathless in the blast of some sneezing, rot-toothed dragon. This guided tour god is tough going. As vistas go, it's in questionable taste. Hills bare-ribbed and dried to the bone. Satan plays Lego with Rwandan skeletons, chews over the remains of hope in Darfur and 1,000 other slums. Such pornography of desolation. Oh God, can these bones live? Have we been brought to this? We wait on you. Do not press rewind, returning things to the good old days that never were. Plant something new in us. Reassemble the strewn backbones of our resolve. Breathe prophecy into us so that blade by blade, tuft by tuft, we may animate these Lenten slopes with living green of Easter hopes. Thank you, Ian, for your poetry and your prophetic words, offering us an answer as we stand here in the darkness and the snow. Let us see the stars and plant something new in us so we can feel hope and find meaning in the small points of light we can see in a sometimes very dark sky. Let us continue to care deeply for those around us, but also take time out to love ourselves, renew, and heal. Let the silence speak to us. Breathe in the beauty of nature. Slow down enough to let the silence provide us the answers we seek. And also, may we be empowered to speak truth to power, breathing prophecy into us, and to stand with others to call out for justice, compassion, people over profits. And let us dwell in gratitude that will help us not only to see the stars, but head toward the light. Thank you, my brothers and sisters in this community, my stars, for helping me to continue to see the stars.